Hello, welcome to the lecture series of Computer Networks. I am Harsh Khattar, working as Assistant Professor in Department of Computer Science at KITE Group of Institutions, Ghaziabad. In last class, we discussed about the encoding schemes. When we are transferring our signal from sender side to receiver side, our data is converted into the signals. So, we have seen the various examples of encoding schemes where I focused on the Manchesters and differential Manchester scheme. I hope you have practiced both the questions. Today, we will focus on the important topic, that is ISDN. It is basically the integrated services which we are using over the PSTN. So, we will discuss this ISDN in detail in today's session, and then followed by the revision of all important topics of unit 1. ISDN is used over the PSTN. In the early ages of network, we were using the public switched telephone network, where the telephone lines were used for the communication purpose. Then as the era changed, we are using the integrated services over the PSTN. Like I am also sending the digital data over the speech. As I am calling to my friend, I am saying hello, he is also replying and acknowledging. So, here we are talking about the transmission of speech from one end to another. This is the PSTN method, but with this now I am also sending the digital data in the form of sound, in the form of images. So, if these things are possible, it means we are talking about the integrated services. So, these integrated services are used with the digital network. So, this is ISDN, Integrated Services Digital Network. So, this is basically a set of communication with the digital transmission of speech or data. So, we can say yes, multiple types of data are clubbed together, wrap it, and then we are sending over the network, over the transmission medium. So, this is ISDN. So, let us discuss in detail about ISDN, what are the advantages, disadvantages, characteristics, what are the interfaces, how ISDN works. When we talk about ISDN, so the first thing which comes to our mind is, yes, we are talking about the speech as well as the data. Both things are clubbed together and we are sending it over the transmission medium. Yes, ISDN was further replaced by the DSL, which is the digital subscriber link. We have seen there is a router box at our home in the form of modem, and we are using the telephone line cable with this. In some of the offices might be you have seen these type of DSL. ISDN is focusing on, or you can say was the first step where we are adding multiple types of data over the network. So, it was the initial, or we can say the revolution in this field of network. It is clearly mentioned in the first line that ISDL supports both circuit switching as well as the packet switching. In initial time, we were using only the circuit switching. I hope you remember what are the advantages and disadvantages of using the circuit switched network, where first the connection establishment was there, and once the connection is established, we are sending the data stream over the circuit. If in case unfortunately the circuit was broken, then we need to send the data again. But in packet switching, the packets, the chunk of data is made one packet, and all the packets are of equal size. Each and every packet is carrying the source and destination address, and we are sending the data over the packet switching manner. So, ISDN supports both circuit switching as the telephone network system as well as the packet switching to send the data as well as the voice. So, it is clearly mentioned that the digital transmission of voice and data. This results obviously the better voice and data quality. So, currently if I compare with the 3-4 decades back communication network, so currently the system is much better. Initial age of the network was related to the PSTN, then it was the ISDN. So, in our syllabus our focus is on the ISDN. To fulfill the requirement of ISDN, we have three main interfaces. First interface is basically the BRI, which is the basic rate interface, then PRI, which is the primary rate interface, and then the BISDN. BISDN means broadband ISDN. Generally, when we are sending the data from digital to digital and digital to analog, then there are the two components, broadband and baseband. Here, the ISDN is taking it as one interface of broadband ISDN, which is BISDN. We will talk about all three interfaces in detail, that what is the working of ISDN on behalf of these three interfaces, what is the actual role of these three interfaces, what exactly there in the interface. When we talk about the ISDN, the very first thing is the basic rate interface. In basic rate interface, yes, all these interfaces are for the smooth communication of data, means the data as well as the sound or voice is integrated together in the form of multiple types of data and we are transmitting it. So, here in this ISDN, this first interface, which is a basic rate interface, carries two channels. Channel number 1 is this beta channel and then delta channel. These two type of channels are working together for the smooth communication, where these beta channels are carrying the sound data, means our voice, image and other type of data streams which we are sending it to the receiver side. So, these are two channels which is known as 2B channels and 1D channel. The speed of these channels varies. As mentioned here, the speed of this data bearing channels, B channels, are 64 kbps at max. So, if I am talking about sending the data and two channels are there, so they are carrying 64 kbps speed, and for the D channel we have 16 kbps of speed. If I club all, then it is 144 kbps. But with this, there is some overhead of this interface, which this BRI interface itself takes some sort of overhead, and this overhead is of 48 bits. So, in this case, if I add 144 to 48 kbps, then it will become 192 kbps. So, in gate, you may find what is the minimum required bandwidth here when we are talking about the digital pipe of BRI. So, the answer is 192 kbps. Okay? So, this is all about the basic rate interface. Another one, it is more important than the BRI, this is the primary rate interface. Here the number of channels are much more than the BRI. In BRI we are using 2B channels, here we are using 23B channels. So, you can see 21 more channels are used in this, and in BRI we are using 1 D channel, delta channel, and here we are using 1 delta channel. So, there is no change in the delta channel because delta channel is somewhat about the making the connections. So, it is mentioned here that both are used for the user voice, data, data image and sound, but D is basically making the bondings here. Now, if we talk about what is the difference between BRI and PRI, it was a basic one. It is a primary rate. When the data is transferred, then the data is transferred through these 23B channels, where the speed is of 64 kbps, and also in D channel the speed is 64 kbps. Here it was taking an example that this is a minimum one and this is a maximum speed. So, if we calculate and we are dividing the speed or the bandwidth among all the channels and including the overhead of the system, overhead means what this particular interface is taking or consuming or wasting. So, this is known as the overhead. So, in this case we are considering this is the required bandwidth, which is approx 1.5 Mbps. If you compare it with the BRI, it was in the kbps, 192 kbps, and it is Mbps. Okay? So, that is why in PRI we are using the more channels, more bandwidth is required. And if we talk about what we can send over the ISDN, these interfaces support. So, we can send the voice, data, data images, sound and any other type of data which we are converting towards the digital stream. Digital data stream means in the form of 0 and 1 bits, and if we have bits, we are easily converting it towards the data signal. So, this signal is basically in the form of digital form. The third interface in ISDN is BISDN. As I said, B represents for the broadband. So, in this case, we can say the rates are much higher than the PRI. So, if I compare about the three interfaces, basic rate interface, primary rate interface and this broadband interface. So, in this case, you can make a conclusion that BRI, PRI and BISDN. So, this is a requirement of the speed here. Okay. So, here the number of channels are less in BRI, 2 B channels and 1 D channel, in PRI 23 B channels and 1 D channel. And what about the broadband ISDN? This is basically broadband ISDN is one example where we are sending the data in the high speed, high bandwidth. Okay. So, as mentioned in the first line, the narrow ISDN is designed over the particular communication with the wires and the speed is low. And when we talk about the broadband ISDN, this BISDN is using the optical fiber. So, in physical layer at the time of discussion, I mentioned this point in the fiber optical wire, when we are sending the data, so the speed is much more than this. So, previous two rates were the example of narrow band, and when we are using the broadband interface, this is optional part. In broadband ISDN interface, we are sending the data for the longer distance and the better bandwidth. So, here we have the much more capability than the BRI and PRI. Yes, it is clearly mentioned that the supporting rates are greater than the primary rate, and obviously, if it is greater than the primary rate, means it is also greater than the basic rate interface. So, this is all about the three interfaces under the ISDN. I hope now these three interfaces are clear, what are the data rates and what is the nomenclature. The next thing is basically what are the services provided by ISDN. In the first slide we discussed about, yes, ISDN provides all type of data sending functionalities. The data transmission is very good in ISDN over PSTN, means the traditional method. So, this is the only functionality. Yes, this is the only functionality, but it supports some supplementary services as well. So, all the services of ISDN are categorized into three main categories. So, if you write it point wise point, then there are so many services, but if you categorize them, there are three categories. Category number 1 is the bearer service, then tele service and supplementary service. We will discuss these three services one by one. In bearer service, the main concept is we are sending the data. So, when we are talking about sending the data among OSI model, among the 7 layers, this bearer services focuses on the first 3 layers of OSI model. Okay? So, this is the main difference between the bearer and tele services. So, these tele services and bearer services. So, bearer services says, if I focus on the bearer service, so bearer service says the transfer of information, you can send it over the voice, data and video, but the focus is on the first 3 layers of OSI model. It supports both circuit switch as well as packet switch, because it is a part of ISDN, and in ISDN we have initially seen that circuit switch and packet switch both are supported one. But the main concern about the bearer services is they strictly follow the ISDN standards. So, why I am focusing on this line? Because in tele services, the standard is not followed. there are some sort of data which we can't send over the bearer services and we don't have the standards, then we are using the Tele Services. The Tele Services focuses on layer 4 to 7 of OSI model. So, we have seen the first 3 layers are covered under the bearer services and 4 to 7 layers are covered under the Tele Services. Yes, the data is same, we are talking about, yes, you can send the voice data or image data, any sort of data which is in the data stream, but the standards are not up to the mark. Also, when we talk about the higher layers of the medium, then they are also able to change the data. In bearer services, the data is exactly what we are sending, what we are receiving. Means there is no moderation, no tempering of data. But in Tele Services, if we are sending some sort of data, it can be tempered, modified by the layers of the OSI model. So, these are the basic difference between the bearer services and the Tele Services. So, it is clearly mentioned in the Tele Services that the process, the content may change. Okay? Rest, everything is as per the bearer services, there is no as such change, but they don't follow the exact standards of ISDN. So, if these two services are doing all the tasks, what is the role of supplementary services? Bearer services sending the data, follow the standards and no tampering. Tele services send the data, but don't follow the standards. If there is some negotiation, it can be done. You can easily moderate the things, because bearer service follow 1 to 3 layers and the Tele Services follows 4 to 7 layers. Here, what is the role of supplementary services? We have seen when we were calling somebody, then there are some chargeable calls. Still, when we have the free data plans, still we have some chargeable calls. So, these are the examples of supplementary services. Let us focus on this. When we talk about the supplementary services, these are the additional functionalities to the bearer services and the Tele Services. What bearer and Tele Services are doing? Yes, you can do, but there are some add-on functionalities. This is something like the plugins with the original software or application. Here, the reverse charging means that we are paying something for the service which we are using. Okay? There is some hidden charges, some sort of thing which we are applying to send this message, the 6 rupees cost, or if you are calling to this number, then you have to pay the extra charge of 3 rupees per minute, like this. So, this is call waiting service, means we are sending the data, but we have some sort of queuing service as well. Then message handling service, we are getting the missed call alerts. Yes, this is the supplementary service which is under the ISDN. So, I hope with these examples, the role of supplementary services are clear to all of you. So, these are some examples of supplementary services which we have with the Tele Services and the bearer services. So, these are the services provided by ISDN. Another important is the advantage and disadvantage of ISDN. Yes, obviously we are saying it is good over the PSTN, means higher rates are there, better quality of the data is in the transmission, but one disadvantage is the cost is high. Okay? So, here it is clearly mentioned the ISDN channels have the reliable connection, we have a full-fledged interface, then we have the services which supports ISDN, then it uses the facility of multiple digital channels. We have seen there are multiple B channels for sending the data, the beta channels and delta channels. We can use the various interfaces in this. So, the system is performing faster data transfer rate over the PSTN. We are discussing just over the PSTN. Okay? Then what is the disadvantage? When we are performing this, we are using some extra effort, then obviously the cost is quite high in comparison to the PSTN network. So, here it is mentioned other telephone system means we are taking the reference of public switch telephone network. And yes, it also requires some additional specialized digital devices which is able to handle these 23 channels, B channels and 1 D delta channel in this. Otherwise, we are going to twist the wires, which again costs more. So, this is all about the advantage and disadvantage. For more ISDN working, you can refer the Tannenbaum book. So, this lecture is from the Andrew S. Tannenbaum Computer Networks. Now, the summary of today's lecture, what we have discussed yet is what is ISDN, what are the features, services provided by the ISDN. One more thing we missed in this is basically the terminals. When we talk about the diagram of ISDN, then we have the terminal adapter and the basic terminals where we are adding the connections. Basically, the interfaces are used in these terminal services. In the university syllabus, you will see this terminal handling. So, this terminal handling is means what is the end device of ISDN support. So, these can be the questions in university exam. What are the services provided by ISDN? What is the difference between the 3 interfaces or 2 interfaces like BRI, PRI, or we have the BISDN service, and what is basically the LAN backbone network functionalities. So, LAN backbone network, we are studying this PSTN, ISDN under this backbone network as well. What is the infrastructure, what type of services we are providing, what type of transmission is possible through the LAN. Now, come to the very important section for the university exam point of view, especially this AKtU. When we talk about the first unit, so we have taken 8 to 9 lectures in this, and the important concepts for the university point of view is what exactly computer network is, what is the topology, what are the network devices. So, these type of questions are there in the university exam, which ranges from 2 marks to the 10 marks. So, moreover 20% of the syllabus is coming, 20% of the questions are coming from this unit number 1. So, what are the important questions? Yes, these are very important if you are going to study unit number 1. So, first focus on these topics and then you can go in depth and study the other topics which are not mentioned on the slide. So, very first thing is role of computer networks. You will find 2 mark question in the university exam. Next is the OSI model and its layer. So, might be there is a question, discuss the OSI reference model, why it is a reference model, what are the layers, explain the functionality of each and every layer, these type of question in 10 marks. This is very important. Then TCP IP model. TCP IP model means this is a lesser layer model which is practically implemented. Might be you will see one question related to what is the difference between OSI model and the TCP IP model. So, this is very important to understand first. Once these models are done, then the next thing is transmission of data. For transmission of data, very first thing is switching methods. So, we have studied circuit switching, message switching and packet switching. Transmission media. So, we are sending the data wireless format or wired format. So, in this we are also discussing about the physical layer, what are the roles and responsibility of physical layer, which type of media we are selecting, what are the other methods or mode of transmission, simplex, half duplex, duplex. So, these are very important. Then network topologies, star, mesh topology, bus topology we are following. This is basically how the network devices are connected. Then devices, we have thoroughly studied about the layer wise devices, starting from the hub, switch, router. We have studied all the devices layer wise, that in physical layer you are using these devices. So, you can see one question related to the topology and devices in exams as well as in the competitive exams like GATE or NET. Types of delay and bandwidth numerical. So, this is a conceptual concept and you might be see 1 or 2 questions or small questions, means 2 marks or 3 marks add on with the theory part, that explain the types of delay, what is propagation delay, and one question which is related to the transmission delay or propagation delay like this. And another one is the bandwidth numerical. Say you are using optical fiber and we know that in the optical fiber the speed is the speed of light. So, we are considering the speed of light for this, and yes, this is a distance. So, you can calculate what is the bandwidth of the network if you are sending this amount of data. So, these type of numericals can be there. Then encoding numericals, which we have seen in the previous lecture, and important one is the Manchester and differential Manchester encoding. or you can also do the NRZ L or NRZ inversion or return to 0 encoding. Then ISDN, which we have covered in today's class. So, this is all about the unit number 1. In next class, we will study about the next layer, which is a data link layer. Thank you.